All right. Mad Magazine trading cards. We're going to open up Series 1. And I also have Series 2. But that will be for another video. In this video, we'll pretty much just be covering the Mad Magazine itself, not necessarily these cards. Mad Magazine was first published in 1952, which was a year before Playboy cards, or Playboy was published. Mad Magazine was founded by William Gaines and eventually brought in Harvey Kurtzman and the editor Al Fieldstein. Mad Magazine actually launched as a comic book before it launched as a magazine. It was from the comic book line of EC Comics. Mad Magazine is the last standing title from the comic company EC Comics. One thing Mad Magazine was definitely known for was this guy right here on the front. His name was Alfred E. Neuman. That was the character's name anyway. The artist for Alfred E. Neuman was a guy by the name of Norman Mingo. Alfred E. Neuman was obviously pretty much the mascot for Mad Magazine. He was literally the face of the magazine. Every magazine, the issue of that magazine would pretty much just, whoever they were poking fun at or whatever the topic was, they would just pretty much paste his face over top of the subject. Now, with Alfred E. Neuman, there did come some controversy in the late 50s to early 60s when Mad Magazine started really taking off. Sorry for the noise. But the person who was thought to originally create Alfred E. Neuman, back in, actually, I think it was 1945, he claimed to have created him, but it wasn't him fighting for the rights for him. It was actually his wife. He had passed away, and his wife was a widow, and she felt like it was hers. Nothing wrong with that. And actually, Mad Magazine kind of believed it. I don't think they really wanted to do battle with that. And so they were almost just going to drop Alfred E. Neuman and come up with something else. But I don't know what led them to do it, but they kind of started investigating Alfred E. Neuman character. And they actually found out that the likeliness of his face used went all the way back to 1849. And then they also found that since 1849, he was used quite a bit in just different things. I think he was even used for presidential campaigns, maybe to like make fun of another candidate or something like that. But yeah, his face had definitely been out there before, so it was deemed like, you know, public likeness that anybody could really use his face. So then after obviously that court case, and they won, they definitely did whatever they had to do to make sure that this wouldn't happen again, and they locked up the rights just for them to use Alfred E. Neuman. I thought that was pretty interesting, like back in the early 60s, without Google or anything, how they figured out that he was used all the way back in 1849, but they figured it out anyway. And so yeah, Alfred E. Neuman, he would, like I said, he would be on the cover of just different kinds of magazines, and usually making fun of people or subjects or anything like that, and pretty much his face would just be, like I said, pasted over whatever the subject was. From 1952 to 2018, Mad published over 550 different issues of the magazine, which is actually pretty impressive for any magazine to have over 500 issues, 550 issues. That's a lot. In 2018, Mad Magazine ended their newsstand distribution. So they went from all the way from 1952 to 2018, just by pretty much putting them on newsstands and in stores that would take them. And after 2018, you could only really find them in small comic book stores, or not small comic book stores, like a small amount of comic book stores, and through subscription. That was the only way you could get them. Before that, they were, I'm not going to say like, oh, they were everywhere, but they were pretty easy to find anywhere that really sold a magazine, like a store or something. What's that on there? Okay, I think we got something cool already. I didn't even know there was like cool kind of cards in here. Just to show you what I'm talking about, I seen something there on top of that card that I didn't see on other cards. Yeah. So the original creator of Mad Magazine, the guy who thought it up, he actually found success before he created Mad Magazine. He actually started, his name was William Gaines, but he actually started Tales from the Crypt. Tales from the Crypt Keeper. I don't think it was called Tales from the Crypt Keeper, it was just Tales from the Crypt, sorry. And The Vault of Horror. So he was doing like horror comic books. And I mean, I personally think that, you know, Tales from the Crypt was a pretty big thing even in the late 80s, early 90s kind of. So I found that pretty interesting that he was the one who created Tales from the Crypt. I mean, I think that's amazing. A lot of history behind this guy already, just between Mad Magazine and Tales from the Crypt. So after Tales from the Crypt, he only had like a certain audience, really, right? And especially back in like the 50s, I mean, that wasn't really like a big genre back then, horror stuff. But it was definitely groundbreaking for him. Like, not a lot of people were making horror magazines or horror comic books. So he started at Mad Magazine. And when he started Mad Magazine, he knew it was kind of a different avenue than what he was used to. So he reached out for some help, and he ended up coming in contact with Harvey Kurtzman. They started out making parodies, actually, parodies and satire of Gaines's horror stories. So they would make fun of like his what he already had out, kind of, which I found that pretty cool, because it that also signified to me kind of like, it was almost like the start of like what the Scary Movie franchise did, how they would make fun of horror movies and stuff like that and kind of turn them comical, and yeah, so that's what he was doing. So I think he did it for his first three print releases were just of his old comic books, and they weren't really going too well. So Gaines and Kurtzman came up with the idea, if they're already making parodies of the horrors, why not make parodies of, like, just try different parodies of different things. So on issue number 4, actually, they released a comic book called Super Duper Man, and that was clearly just making fun of Superman. And then after that, I think it was issue number 7, they came out with Starchy, which was making fun of Archie, obviously. So those were two pretty big comic books back in the 50s. See, there's that card there, but it doesn't have that thing on it. We'll put that on a side. Take a look at both of them. So yeah, he started making fun of other things that weren't his, and that became a problem. Um, Obviously, the people who created Superman and other comics, they were pretty upset. So they kind of made a fuss about it. And I'm not sure exactly how it goes, but maybe they had an inside link on publishing and stuff like that. But Gaines and Hertzman started getting noticed, obviously for the wrong reasons. So, also too, once they started releasing the comic books about making fun of other comic books, they wanted to step it up a bit because they seen they were gaining traction. So they started actually working on the covers of their comic books, not necessarily making them so like cartoonish, anime-ish, like a comic book cover would normally be. They started kind of working on like actual real, like not real, but like more realistic designs for the covers. And that was basically to reach a more people. Instead of someone thinking they were picking up a comic book, they would kind of see a magazine cover like this, and maybe not this one, but like something, you know, like this. Not that one either. Something, right? And they would they'd feel more compelled to pick it up and look at it because it wasn't necessarily just a comic book. Not at first glance, you didn't know what to think of it, so you would pick it up and look at it. The problem, well, it was good. Obviously, that helped their sales. But also too, kids now were kind of always into it, but it wasn't like a big deal, but it was definitely something that was noticed that Mad magazines were starting to make their way into a lot of schools, because they were getting past like the teachers and stuff. You know, they didn't really look like a comic book or something like that, so a kid could have one open up on his desk and no one would think twice about it. But obviously they started catching on. So going back to them getting into trouble, kind of, or making people upset about them taking the Superman and Archie. There was a complaint made against their kind of like their horror line of comics. That was the only thing they could really get them on, because they couldn't go after them for parody and satire. That was freedom of you know, freedom of speech, kind of like, so they couldn't go after them for that. So they were actually called to a congressional hearing in 1954. And what it was they were pretty much just getting into trouble because they were saying that they were suggesting that Gaines's horror line of comics were related to juvenile delinquency, with the Vault of Horrors and the Tales from the Crypt. So they were trying to, like, it's not proven or anything, but just what I think, like they were trying to kind of take them down, like put an end to them. So they went to court and they lost. They tried to defend like their case, and it obviously didn't work. And because it went to court, they actually had to, not them, but the Comic Code Authority was created. And what that was like a self-governing for comic books. Any comic book that wanted to be released had to go through the Comic Code Authority to get a seal of approval, to be able to sell and to be able to release to newsstands. So, like I said, with the parody, they kind of got away with it, but I think they were trying to really just shut them down. I think they thought that their horror line was their main goal, which it probably was at the time. They were probably really focused on that horror line, the Tales from the Crypt and stuff like that. But after this congressional hearing, that horror line was essentially shut down. They were saying, like I said, it led to juvenile delinquency, and they figured that that line of comics was a major player in it. So they shut down all the horror stuff they were doing, and to even get away with even more with what Mad wanted to do, they figured they'll become a magazine, just by extending the trim size of the book. They figured that'd be pretty simple, and then they wouldn't have to go through a comic code agency when they wanted to release a magazine, because now, they're to release a magazine because they weren't a comic book anymore. So on July 1955, issue number 24 was not a comic book; it started becoming a magazine. Also, too, when they became a magazine, they had no advertising. There was no advertising in their magazine. Um, yeah, they had no real ads in the magazine. They would come up with parody ads in the magazine. I can't explain them. If you know, you know. But there was just so many, right? Obviously, like every magazine has ads, so you got to figure just how many they had that they can make up. And yeah, that's what they did. They made their own ads, and they would have people who work for the company kind of dress up or model, and they would be the ad, whatever they were selling, sunglasses or hairstyles or something. It would be people from the company, and it was kind of looked at like Mad Magazine was thumbing their nose at the industry by not putting in ads and stuff like that. But that's not what the real reason was. He couldn't. Gaines didn't want to profit from consumerism by using parody and satire. He didn't think that was right, which obviously makes sense. Like if you have parody and satire, that's what your magazine's based off, and then you're making a joke out of a lot of things. Like the last thing you want to do if you want to be taken seriously as like what you're trying to build your brand as, like you're not going to be asking people to buy stuff from consumerism, right? Like mainstream stuff. You're kind of trying to go make fun of mainstream stuff, so that'd be the last thing you'd want to do is be making money off that. Like I said, if you wanted to be taken seriously as what you were trying to pull off. And I think it worked. I think they built their brand pretty good, obviously. That definitely helped their business grow because people understood like what they were doing by not doing the ads thing, by doing their own thing. People definitely got it and understood. So that helped them actually even more grow with popularity. In the early 70s is when they really started taking off. 1974, they were selling over 2 million issues a year, which is a lot in 1974, especially to be selling 2 million of any kind of one brand. So yeah, they were on the roll in the 1970s, but the 1970s too is also when they kind of started getting more political. They were heavily focused on Nixon, presidential races, the Cold War stuff. Kind of, they were into stuff like that. The Cold War, I think, helped out with one of their inside the comics, kind of the Spy versus Spy, which was created by Antonio Porras. They also they would do like parody songs. They would write down new lyrics to old songs, but they would also keep some of the old lyrics for the songs. So and they were doing like famous, like popular songs. They weren't just doing kind of like songs that no one heard of. So the people who I don't know who exactly it was, but they were taken to court a couple times over the music parodies. People obviously were not happy about that, who created those songs, especially that mainly because they didn't change the whole song. They were using some of the original lyrics and just kind of only switching out a couple words, which obviously, I don't know. I don't think that's fair, but whatever. That's what Mad Magazine was at that time. That's what they were doing. So they got taken to court, and they actually won that. They won that because of the simple freedom of entertainment and social criticism. They were allowed to do it. And also too, I think, and like I said, this isn't proven or anything like that. There's that card there with the, what the heck that is. It's the same as that card. It's just got the thing on it. Yeah, I think they won that case kind of because when they were taking the court earlier, over them making fun of like Superman and stuff like that, I think they got it pretty hard. Like they pretty much shut down their horror line, but I don't know if they expected them to keep going as hard as they did and make Mad Magazine their new go-to. So I think it was almost kind of like a payback for Mad Magazine for them to get off the hook so easy with that parody song stuff, because it was pretty I don't know. If I was a music creator, I don't think I would like it too much. So I definitely knew where music creators are coming from. And like I said, I think just what they went through before. And there's that card again. but now it doesn't have the thing on it. Let's make a collection of these cards. That's a cool cover. Trippy. Yeah, so I think they got off easy on that, and they kind of won that because maybe they felt bad for them, or maybe they just seen how big they'd grown since the last course case, and they weren't really going away. So the last thing they wanted to do was kind of get in their way. I don't know though. Like, this is just me speculating. There's no truth to this or facts to this. Sorry. And yeah, so that was one thing that kind of made them popular and famous, like in the 70s, early 70s, where they started kind of taking off, was the parody music, and just how they were, you know, getting in trouble a lot, and they were rebellious, you know, and that's what kind of started drawing people to them, really. Like, it was a whole new thing. That thing had not really kind of been done yet, standing up kind of for what you thought you could make, or I don't know, necessarily believe in, but I mean, they were starting to stand up for themselves, and it was working. They were getting bigger and bigger. Like I said, 74, they sold over 2 million copies, and yeah, just covering stuff like war times 2 and stuff like that. They gained a lot of like hippies liked Mad Magazine. I don't even know if you can call them hippies or not, but you know, people wear bell bottoms and flowers in their hair. Those kind of people, like, were really, that was Mad Magazine's like main audience. And there was Mad Magazine actually. I don't know what exactly issue it was, but they made a how to apply for a draft dodger card, like to get out of fighting in the war, which you know, whatever, I'm not really talking about that, I'm just saying like what it is. They put something in their magazine that said if you called or if you wrote J. Edgar Hoover and told him, he would send you getting a draft get out of the draft certificate or card or whatever. So that didn't really go too far, because like obviously it was just a big joke, and you know, it was like, by that time it was just like known that Mad Magazine, like, that's the kind of stuff they were doing, so there was nothing really you could do about it, even though people were writing J. Edgar Hoover asking for to not be entered in the draft and stuff like that. I'm sure it didn't make them happy, but what are you gonna do, right? And then another thing that kind of got them in trouble in the 70s, they actually had once again, I don't know what issue it was, but they had how to write like an extortion letter. So they had like literally kids, not kids, but like, you know, teenagers and stuff like that, like just jokingly like writing extortion letters to here and there, and when they would get in trouble for it, they would say, oh, you know, it was like a joke, I read it in Mad Magazine, and then once again it was kind of brought to court. And same thing, just because they knew what Mad Magazine was about, they didn't really get in trouble for it. You know, it was just kind of like, knock it off, like, don't do it again, and it was okay. It was like, sure, we won't do it again, and that was the end of that. They also had a magazine too, where they created a $3 bill and had it in the magazine. So Mad Magazine didn't really think anything of it, but I guess what people were doing was putting it in, I don't know if change machines really a thing back then, which I don't really understand, and getting money back, because I'm sure there's more to it than just a piece of paper going in the machine. But I guess they look good enough that they could pass them off at a store, like a kid buying candy or something, just a quick change, throw the bill on the counter and kind of leave the store, and before someone would figure out what was going on, they'd already be gone. So that's a nice damage card there. So yeah, the $3 bill thing, music parodies, draft dodger letters, how to write extortion letters. All that stuff was going on in like the early 70s. So like they started just taking off. Like they were just seen as like a really rebellious thing. Yeah, and people loved it, and they gained that following, and they never really lost that following. What they picked up in the 70s, the people who got with Mad Magazine in the 70s stayed loyal to Mad Magazine up until pretty much 1992. We'll get into that, but for now, that's what they were doing. Another thing too that made Mad Magazine pretty popular, like I said, now the stuff inside the magazine was spy versus spy, but at the end of every magazine, on the back page, there was the foldable back cover, where you would fold it in half, and it would kind of reveal like a secret message or a hidden message to you. So that was a big thing for people. They really liked that. It was almost like not everybody, but a lot of people would just want to see the magazine just for the back cover. It was definitely a feature to the magazine to get to that back page and fold that in half. Even as a kid, I remember that. Just like you remember Spy versus Spy. Like if you ever picked up Mad magazine, like the three things I remember is Alfred E. Neuman, Spy versus Spy, and that foldable back cover. Those were the three things that I would definitely take an interest in. And then, so like I said, they were pretty popular in the 70s, and they carried that popularity all the way up to 1992 when Gaines had passed away, the creator of Mad Magazine. He passed away in 1992. And everything was going smooth and fine, and there was no real change in the magazine or the direction of the magazine. They were still releasing every month, and things were running smooth, but something was definitely missing, and readers could definitely tell. It wasn't the same. Like that's a pretty unique magazine, and whoever created it, obviously, like that's one mind that like you can't really duplicate like what he's thinking, the way he's thinking, but you can get an idea of what he's thinking, so you can kind of make it work, right, by carrying it on and making it work, and they did. Also too, with the fan base that they had picked up since the 70s up until 1992. Look at that card. That thing's like right ripped. Weird. Huh? Okay. Yeah, they were just kind of really after 1992. They lost quite a bit of the people who had been following them for the past 20 years, but they also kind of gained a new audience. They kind of started going in a more direction of got out of political stuff a lot, not too much. They were still doing a bit, but they started focusing on more like pop culture stuff, like music artists, movies. Like the 90s was huge. Same with the late 80s. Like it was huge for movies. 90s was huge for movies. So that was like easy stuff for them to do. It was like make fun of a movie, make fun of an actor, make fun of a song, something like that, right? And especially too, like I said, things were really popping in the 90s with music and that. So artists' faces were everywhere, movie stars' faces were everywhere. So they were all easily recognized. Like if they put them on the magazine, you wouldn't really need a lot of context behind what they were trying to do. You would just figure out like that movie star is pretty popular. You see that movie star everywhere, and now he's on a Mad magazine. So that's the kind of route they went. Was they started doing stuff not more cheaply, but they weren't just getting as deep politically as they were before. And like I said, that was mostly because of Gaines passing away in 1992. Why did you just double down? Maybe we didn't need to open a whole box here, but we did. Yeah, so 1992 to 2001, they did all right. Like I said, they were kind of getting new followings, but they definitely lost some of their old followers. And in 2001, they switched to glossy full color printing. Before it was just black and white pages like this here. And by 2001, it looked like an actual magazine with fully color printed pages, and they actually started putting real advertising in the magazine. Two of these back to back. Okay. Yeah, they started putting real ads in the magazines in 2001. But the ads were pretty much just candy and video game based. So once again, just like they were getting away from their key demographic of what they had before. So now, even since 1992 to 2001, the people who kind of picked up on it for like making fun of pop culture, they were even kind of getting out of it. Because, like I said, it was kind of almost gearing more towards a way younger audience. The Mad used to do the letters to Mad, which is like letters to the editor, and they just found even through that. I think they even stopped putting them in there. It was just, oh, cool. Something happened to that guy. Have we seen that one yet? Yeah, we've seen that one. Yeah, the letters to the editor kind of thing. So they started taking that out. because it just wasn't like the same. Those in themselves were just entertainment. You know, hearing what some guy from college had to say, or some guy, a lot of the letters to the editor actually were guys in the army. So that was like just being taken over by, like I said, kind of like way younger generation. And yeah, so they just stopped kind of doing that. Like I said, just kind of really started changing the way things were. And yeah, that's, you know, pretty much it for a little history of Mad Magazine. I was definitely a fan of Mad Magazine. Like, obviously, it wasn't like my favorite thing in the world, especially too in the mid '90s. I mean, you had video games and stuff like that. Like magazines and even toys were really kind of on their way out. Well, it depends how old you were. By 1995, I was about 10, 11 years old. So, like I said, when you know, you had Super NES, and then like Sega and Nintendo 64, and then eventually PlayStation. Like, all that happened in the 90s. So video games were like a big thing. So like stuff like Mad Magazine was not really, you know, it all kind of coincided when Gaines died in 1992. Really, like, it just kind of was like a perfect storm. The world was changing. People definitely were not into magazines and stuff anymore. Even toys, really. Like, when video games came out, like, toy companies really had to pick up their game to make kids more interested in toys. And still, that didn't even really help. And I'm not a toy historian or a toy expert or anything by any means. This is just me rambling on, trying to get through a box of cards. And just kind of what I believe and what I saw and what I remember as a kid. But yeah, Mad Magazine, I definitely had a few issues of it. I even remember kind of when I would go up to my grandparents' house, we'd go to the corner store, and I would always get a Mad Magazine for the weekend just to kind of hold me over. And my uncles would look at it, and they would even kind of like say like, oh, you know, it's not like the same as like when I was a kid. But they didn't like knock it or anything, but they would just kind of try and tell me about it. And like, as a 10-year-old kid, you don't know what they're talking about really, but now I do. Like, yeah, it was a totally different magazine in the mid 90s to compared to the 70s and 80s when they were right into it. So it's kind of funny, like when I was making this video, or how I'm making this video, when I was kind of doing my research, and you kind of just wonder like what if video games were delayed by like 10 years, not only for like Mad Magazine, but just for toys in general, like GI Joes and Micro Machines and Hot Wheels and stuff like that. Like how much bigger would they have gotten or something like that, right? But I think video games kind of took away from a lot of this. It was just something too new. And have we seen that one? Have we seen that one yet? I like that one. I know we've seen that one a few times. And yeah, so that was pretty much it. But yeah, sorry. Yeah, I definitely like Mad Magazines. Like I said, one of the main things that I really liked about Mad Magazine was the Spy versus Spy. I always thought those were cool. And definitely the foldable back cover. I think those were really cool. That's it. So yeah, if you want to come back for series 2, what I plan on talking about is the show for Mad Magazine, how they came up with the TV show. I thought that was, like I said, growing up in the 90s, being around 10 years old to 15 years old. I mean, Mad TV was the thing to do on a Saturday. I remember it came on at 11 or 12 o'clock at midnight on a Saturday, and you'd go to school on Monday, and everybody would be talking about Mrs. Swan or Stewart or Will Sasso. Yeah, so that's kind of what I want to get into in box 2. If you want to come back for that one, we'll go over that one. And then other than that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and hope you come back for number 2. Thank you.